Welcome to selfdiscoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to another edition of Choose Positive Living right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy. My wonderful guest today is Brenda Coffee. We're going to be talking about her new book, Maya Blue, a Memoir of Survival. Oh, I think many of us are trying to survive so much in life, and if anybody can give us some tips, we do need it. She says that it was a fairy tale until it wasn't. And for a long time, that's what successful businesswoman Brenda Coffee told herself when she dared to look back at her 20s and 30s in the Maya Blue, a Memoir of Survival. Brenda opens up about her life that she once lived and all the secrecy, madness, trauma, abuse, and danger that came with it. She details her years married to Philip Ray, a genius who conceived the development of the first desktop computer terminal, followed by the microprocessor and the first personal computer. The infamous and isolated home in San Antonio, Texas, was known as the Spy House on the Hill, for it was a scandalous history of harboring Nazi spies. It was in the basement of the historic home where Philip began spending every waking moment working on his self-destructive project, making cocaine from scratch, becoming an addict to the process. Motivated by the rush and the rewards, Philip lived large and took bold risks, and Brenda was on board with almost anything he wanted, whether it was adventurous, dangerous, sexual, or illegal. After 10 years of frills and close calls, she began to question her blind loyalty when her husband seized on the idea of making real cocaine from scratch, and long before their lives took a terrifying turn. Wow, well, you certainly, my dear, gone down that road that many of us would look at and go, I would never go there. But when you're on the road, it's like, oh, this is pretty. This is nice. This is exciting. Oh, this field makes me feel alive. And the next thing you know, my God, what road am I on? So just a disclaimer, folks, she's got plumbers in the house today, so the dog in the background may be barking. It could be also giving an opinion when we don't know. But welcome to the show, Brenda.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here. And you said something very profound about being on the road, and you don't start down that road saying, "Oh my gosh, I shouldn't be here."
Mm-hmm.
I was 21 and he was 34 and very glamorous, the darling of Wall Street, the founder of
Mm-hmm.
a public company. And our life was adventurous, and we raced cars and searched for minerals and crystals in abandoned silver mines, and eventually got to where we looked for unexcavated Mayan ruins, hoping to stumble across, a piece of pottery in the jungle. And so little by little, I became an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that with each experience, it was thrilling and I thrived on it and I wanted to do another one.
Mm-hmm.
And
Especially in your 20s, right?
oh, I
Because we were exploratory, we're in excitement, give me life in the 20s, right? They were all geared up for it.
yes, and Philip was a fascinating man, and he was brilliant, and he was charismatic. He wasn't a braggart at all. He was very kind of quiet and low profile, and but people just wanted to be around him. He had a magic,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to be. At 21, you think, my goodness, how can I keep a man like this?
Mm-hmm.
And so I made a conscious decision that I wanted to be the woman that he couldn't live without.
Mm.
And at 21, I also realized that I could very dangerously fall into that category of being arm candy.
Hmm.
And so I read like 7 publications a day, whether it was, the top newspapers around the world or Time Magazine, Business Week, Scientific American. I would take a stab at least the first couple of paragraphs. I just, I wanted to be uh, a reflection of him, I guess you would.
Hmm. And try and keep up with him, kind of be able to have that conversation on a certain level.
Well, and he entertained investment bankers in Wall Street and investors. And that we would take someone to dinner maybe twice a week. And the last thing I wanted to be was, the Julia Roberts character in Pretty Woman.
Right.
So, and he had encouraged me to finish my degree.
Hmm.
So I had a degree in journalism and film and filmmaking. And I, I took my cues from him. I didn't want to be the one who was the know-it-all. So at those dinners, I was pretty quiet. I wouldn't say, oh, well, let me tell you what I read. That wasn't me at all. But I could certainly make comments on almost anything that anyone brought up and hold my own at the table.
Hmm.
So that's how it started.
Hmm. And, again, in our 20s, we are kind of geared for adventure. We've gone those years of conforming at school. Sit at the table, do your work, do your homework. We've been at home, do your duties, and this and that. And suddenly we're set free. We're in our 20s. We've got the energy, we've got the exuberance, we've got the excitement and the exploration. And I imagine being around somebody that was so brilliant, that was so sought after, that, was so inventive, literally, but inventive in his approach to life would have been quite intoxicating.
Oh, it was. But there was also something else that I think we need to factor into this. When I had just come off of really being my mother's mother.
Mm,
So
mm,
when I was 12 or 13, my father died of cancer, and my mother just spiraled into depression. And at the time, we called it a nervous breakdown. I don't know if anybody still uses that term or not, but she stayed in her room on Valium with the shades pulled, and she just I was responsible for everything, whether it was riding my bicycle to the grocery store and filling my basket with as much as it could hold with food, or getting the boy down the street to mow the yard. Um, we role reversed, and I was
mm,
the mother and she was the daughter. And those were roles that we played until a few years ago when she died of dementia.
mm.
And at that age, at 12 or 13, I didn't know anyone else who was their mother's caregiver.
Right.
So, in order to take on such a huge job, I pretended that I wasn't afraid of anything or anybody.
Hmm.
And that's, I looking back, I realized that I cut off my highs and lows and lived somewhere in the middle,
Hmm.
which allowed me not to get too excited over anything, but then I wouldn't panic either. I learned not
Hmm.
to panic and to kind of like bluff my way through anything. Oh, I can do this.
Right.
So when I met this intoxicating man when I was 21, um, again, I had a bravado, but it wasn't overt. But he picked up on the fact that I was not your average 21-year-old.
Hmm.
And I think that appealed to him. So yes, at that point, then I was able to slide right into this. Oh, I'm brave. Yes, I'll learn to race Porsches. Yes, I want to learn to scuba dive. Oh yes. I want an underwater camera and I'll take underwater pictures. Um, so whatever it was, I was on board for it.
But you also knew you had a level head and you could take responsibility.
Exactly.
Right. So a lot of 21-year-olds are still kind of giggly and, kind of or immersing into a career. As so you're not necessarily, kind of typical, the 21-year-old. You had a sense of responsibility, you had a sense of equilibrium. But also then for you, it's like somebody's inviting you to play where you hadn't been allowed to play. And
I
so, oh,
never pray.
right, exactly. So, how exciting! Like, I've got permission to play, right? I can explore, and there's never a thought of, can I do it or can't I do it? It's like, wow, it's presented to me. Let's do it.
Not only that, but he said, I'll leave it up to you where we go and what we do,
Mm,
knowing that I would go to the university's library where I graduated from, and I would research, like unexcavated areas in the Yucatan where you might be likely to find Mayan ruins. Or, as I said, we started out looking for minerals and crystals, so I would go to the library and I would research silver mines in the southwestern United States and in Mexico because silver, wherever you find silver, you find other minerals like azurite and malachite and
hmm
amethyst crystals. So I would come back with maps of where these places were. If they were shut down, um, I I would try to get permission to come in on the property. I would make airline reservations and hotel reservations, car rentals, whatever we needed. And generally, a friend or two would come with us. And I would just tell Philip, I'd say, okay, a week from Friday, clear your calendar because here's what we're doing.
hmm
So all of that was on me.
That, well, again, another reason why you chose the responsibility, knew you were capable of doing it. He was interested in the adventure, but not in the setting up, right?
Not at all. Plus,
Right.
I had also dropped out of college before I met him to go to work, and I had been both accounts payable and accounts receivable to a publicly held company. So he knew I was really responsible,
hmm
and he depended on me a lot.
You don't get too many people that are responsible and then do their due diligence that are also adventurous and exploratory. Those two things don't normally come together. Sensibility and exploration doesn't always come together in people.
No, it doesn't, but it did with him because he had a lot of interesting rules of thumb. Like, um, he would always tell me that, for instance, with if you're going to start a company, he said most people think about how they're going to get into a deal and start the company, but they never think about their exit strategy.
hmm
You need to understand that before you go in, and you need to see that coming down the road and have options. Or another one of his rules of thumb was always plan for worst case.
hmm
So whenever we were on any of these adventurous expeditions, that was always in my mind. That was in Philip's mind.
hmm
Like make sure that have enough water with us because, as happened one time, our car broke down in the middle of nowhere and on the desert,
mm.
Arizona. And
And this is before cell phones, folks, before you
oh,
could phone somebody, right?
totally. And our friend that was with us had a bad back, and Philip said, I need to stay and see if I can fix the car. And you're young and healthy, and your back is in great shape. So, in other words, I was the one designated to run as fast as I could across the desert before it got dark. And when it got dark in the desert, if anybody has ever been to those parts of the world, it's beastly hot during the day, but when the sun goes
Yeah.
down, it's downright cold.
Yeah, never mind all the other critters, etc., that
That
come out.
is exactly so, Sarah. That's when the rattlesnakes and the
Yes.
bobcats and things come out at night. And so I in that instance took off running as fast as I could because I knew I had to run probably over a mile to get to a road where I would find anybody before the sun went down.
Hmm.
Fortunately, Philip fixed the car and came after me. He and our friend were in the car, but so that was kind of like, you know, planning for worst case in a way. And
Yeah, can you ever think it's like, okay, you fix the car, but sending you across the desert. I mean,
I was the only one. Plus, I took water with me and they had water. That wasn't an ideal situation and maybe not the best example I could give you, but we always had we always thought in terms of worst case.
hmm Which, again, that the sensibility and exploration, those that really do explore life in any form of thing have to have a compass of sensibility. Otherwise, that exploration is going to go wrong very, very quickly. And if
Oh,
you don't have that, if you just like take the leap, which I'm afraid I did, that was me. I wasn't I very much went with the exploration of life without kind of the sensibility of preparing for that exploration because I often didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just got into it, right? And after that, so having that sensibility of worst case scenario, how, have you got in your so-called backpack the tools you need for this exploration is actually something that everybody needs to take on board. This is a tip, folks, right now. Go and explore, please. You hear me say it all the time, but make sure that you are prepared for the exploration of what can go right and what can go wrong.
even to the point of if you're going to take a day trip
Yeah.
someplace into the country, make sure you've got water and maybe something to eat and that your tires are full of air,
Hmm.
you've got a full tank of gas. It's don't just set off and say, wee.
Yeah, like me. Because you can get into some trouble along the way, which I did. Right. So, again, having that common sense, but you had a trust in him that you would be all right. So, whatever's going on through your mind going through that desert, he had a trust and faith in you. So, did that translate into you having faith into yourself?
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. It got to the point where our we have a friend that nicknamed me Rambarella, that I was part Rambo and part Barbarella.
I love that.
So, I could do anything. And then his confidence in me it extended to where we lived on top of this hill in this infamous spy house,
Hmm.
as you mentioned, where the Nazi spies used to live, and they spied on a nearby Air Force base because it was then and still is a pilot training base. So the Germans could gauge how America's war effort was escalating during World War II by how many pilots we were training. So one of our friends kept his Celestron 8 telescope at our house. And I would use it almost every day. On a clear day, I could read the names on the pilots' jumpsuits.
Wow.
I would watch them get into their airplanes, and I just thought that is just fascinating. And I would watch them take off. And Philip suggested, he said, why don't you call them and tell them you'll get a great article for them in a magazine if they'll give you a ride in one of their fighter jets. And so I did that, and they said yes. And
Wow, wow. My father was a fighter pilot in the war, squadron leader. In
yes,
fact, actually, he went to the States to train because obviously they couldn't train in Europe, right? So he went to the States to train, where he learned to fly every single plane. But then he became the squadron leader of the Spitfires to protect the bombers. But it was in Miami that he was training there. So to actually get in a plane, he died when I was 11. So, and he was no longer flying. But I would love to have had that opportunity to get into a plane and kind of feel what he felt, in those planes.
Oh, you would love it. It's thrilling.
Mm.
And we did like 6 Gs and he turned the controls over to me and I just had a wonderful time and it appeared it was a cover story in a Southwest Airlines magazine back when the airline still had magazines that you could,
Mhm.
and the Army and the Marines called me and the Navy, and they said, "We love the article that you did for the Air Force. Do we have any toys you'd like to play with?" And so I said yes, and I became the first journalist to drive and fire the M1 tank. I did a cable arrested landing and a catapult takeoff from an aircraft carrier, and then was on part of the maiden voyage of the USS Dallas nuclear submarine.
Wow.
So, yes, all of this confidence translated into my saying, okay, maybe I am Rambarella. I can do anything.
Yeah. But there's also, I mean, clearly you were in love with him, but it was also his belief in you. I've had that in one relationship in my life where instead of being put down, which was the ex-husband, I had somebody saying, but no, you can do it. Just try. You can do it. Right. And when you've got somebody who says, no, you can do it, just go and do it. That belief of somebody that you love and trust is monumentous, because then you really do believe, well, they see something in me. They know me. So maybe I can do this. Because would you have done it on your own had you not been prodded?
Not at all. I probably wouldn't even have thought of it.
Right.
But it was very empowering. You're right.
Hmm.
And it was as time progressed, it was a good thing that I was empowered that way because when he invented the first smokeless cigarette, which I coined the terms vape and vaping, nobody else was using that then.
Right.
Um, the big six tobacco companies didn't want us to succeed,
Right.
and they threatened our lives.
Hmm.
And
Which they do. There's big money involved. So yes, people think they don't, and it's just a movie, but no, this is fact.
well, it's absolutely true. I'm going to say they're akin to the mob.
Hmm.
It's all about the money, and they
Hmm.
don't care that their cigarettes are killing their
Right.
customers. And our vice president of manufacturing, at this point, I had helped Philip start another public company. And I had written the business plan and helped him raise money. And our vice president of manufacturing was the former president of RJ Reynolds International. And he knew that I was keeping a vape diary, is what I called it.
Hmm.
So he would call me with tidbits from my diary. And I opened the first page of my memoir, Maya Blue, where a man hops over well, actually vaults like a pole vaulter over our gate, manages to set off the alarm and hikes up our hill and knocks on the door. And when I open it, the first words out of his mouth uh, is, I have it on good authority that whoever lives here needs a bodyguard and they
Wow.
better watch their step. And of course, by now I'm really,
Hmm.
remember I've got all this bravado. I've been pretending since I was 12,
Hmm.
cut off my highs and lows. So I didn't panic. I just looked him in the eye and said, "You must have the wrong house."
Hmm.
And we both knew, he knew I was lying.
Right.
And I closed the door in his face. And I told our corporate attorneys, and they hired the sniper on the San Antonio SWAT squad as our bodyguard. Because before this, I already had uh, proof that people were gaining access to our home. They were rifling through my lingerie drawers, the papers on my desk upstairs, Philip's lab downstairs. They were putting our garbage in the trunk of their car.
Mm.
One night I encountered them in our home and I chambered around in a shotgun on the other side of a door, which is an unmistakable sound unless you're deaf.
Yes.
And I counted to three and opened the door, and they were just running down the hall. They thought they were going to get the jump on us.
Hmm.
Instead, I had the jump on them. So I wound up in this position of um, also being his bodyguard in a
Hmm.
way, in
Yeah.
addition to the sniper on the SWAT squad, because Philip had also taught himself organic synthesis chemistry and learned how to make real cocaine. It
Hmm. What year was this?
the late 70s,
Hmm. It's
1980.
kind of before cocaine kind of got really, really big, right?
Well, actually, um, there had been a cover story article on Time magazine that week about how cocaine, interesting question, Sarah. The article was about how cocaine was no longer for the jet set and the Hollywood crowd,
Mm.
that mom and pop America and middle class all over the world were now looking to see what cocaine was all about, and they were buying it.
Hmm.
And it was killing people. They were average mom and pop were now they had a drug dealer.
You're right.
It was always not the safest thing. And so Philip reads this article and he said, well, surely somebody has figured out how to make this. And he said that wouldn't make all the sense in the world, because they wouldn't have to have drug dealers, and you wouldn't have to worry about the cartels in South America or bringing it up through customs. And
So he wanted to commercialize it, to legalize it.
no, no,
No?
no, no, no. He just looked at it. Remember, this is the man that invented the first personal computer.
Hmm.
He invented the microprocessor, the first smokeless cigarette. He
Hmm.
had this thing about increased value.
Mm.
Something that's worth nothing becomes something worth a lot of money.
Hmm.
That was impressed on him when he was a little boy, and his older brother took a piece of wood and carved uh, a model car out of it and won a Ford Foundation 4-year scholarship to Stanford.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or then when Philip took just silicon, which is just a mineral, and created the microprocessor.
Yeah.
So he understood what he called increased value, taking
Hmm.
something like a leaf on a coca bush, which is worth nothing to most of us, and then it turns into cocaine, which is worth a lot of money.
Right.
And it became, he said, I just want a personal challenge, my own personal Rubik's Cube is what he called it.
Hmm.
And so we set up a lab downstairs. And over a 1.5 year period of time, he taught himself how to be an organic synthesis chemist and how to make real cocaine, C17H21NO4.
Hmm.
And all this time, I'm doing my adventures, on with tanks in the Air Force, and I'm restoring this old spy house by myself. And so what he was doing in the basement, it was like watching paint dry, Sarah.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
I couldn't tell,
Right.
whether he was making any progress or not. And I just thought, well, he's happy. It's keeping him occupied.
Yeah.
And of course, he was downstairs with dangerous chemicals. So frequently I would go downstairs and check on him that everything was all right. And he
Hmm.
wasn't sprawled out on the floor, but life was good. Things were fine. We were still taking some of our adventure trips. I was part of starting this other public company. And then when he discovered that he had made real cocaine, it was 100% pharmaceutical cocaine. A doctor friend of ours had access to a gas liquid chromatograph, which law enforcement and hospitals can use to check your urine and your blood, even your hair, for
Mm-hmm.
the presence of drugs and alcohol. Philip sent him a sample and he ran it through the machine at the hospital where he worked. And he called Philip and said, "This is 100% pharmaceutical cocaine. Even doctors don't have access to this. Where did you get it?" And Phil said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yes, I'm sure. Where did you get it?" And Philip just said, "I owe you one. Thanks." And hung.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, he wanted to see what all the fuss was about,
Mm-hmm.
why people would go to such extremes and die
Right.
to use cocaine. And I knew that it was pure. And so I tried it with him, and it scared me to death.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it it made my heart palpitate. I thought I was going to have to go to the emergency room, and I never tried it again. But Philip,
Mm-hmm.
and so he continued to use it. I didn't know that. And he's telling me all this time, he's saying a real organic synthesis chemist would say, "My methods are sloppy. So I'm going to get better at this," because it was only turning out to be like a quarter of a teaspoon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he never thought about commercializing this,
He just kind of became obsessed with perfecting it.
perfecting his scientific manner.
Mm-hmm.
He was a scientist, a physical
Right.
electrical engineer. So it was a challenge, and he wanted to just perfect it. And little do I know until I'm vacuuming one day and there's a corner of the carpet that gets stuck in my vacuum cleaner, and I turn it off and I pull the carpeting out and I go to smooth it back down into the corner of the room, and I feel a lump under the carpeting, and there is a baggie that has cocaine in it.
Mm.
And so I'm thinking he's doing a lot more than just tinkering downstairs. If he's now making and hiding cocaine. And so it was about that point that he started consuming mass quantities of alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
bring himself down because he was so high on
Right.
coke. And so all this time, you know, people are breaking into our house and we're living with a bodyguard.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm trying to keep him from killing himself and us.
Mm-hmm. So the adventure became
I
something,
know.
yeah, not so adventurous.
No, one night when he was not in his right mind. Um, he wasn't even speaking English. I mean, his words didn't make sense. And he pushed me to the ground and began to strangle me.
Wow.
And his, I just remember his eyes, his pupils were huge and his eyes were black. They had this black, blank, vacant gaze of a shark.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept hitting him and trying to get away. And I don't know how I did, but I did. And I ran to the bathroom, but I'd been remodeling the bathroom and painting and putting on new doorknobs. And I forgot that the doorknob that I bought didn't have a lock on it.
Mm.
And I could hear him outside the bathroom door firing a gun.
Oh my God.
And I knew it would only be a matter of seconds before he either fired through the door or opened the door and
Mm-hmm.
shot me. And I didn't have a choice, Sarah. I made a decision to throw open the window and I jumped out of a second story bathroom window,
Wow. Wow.
hoping the tree outside would break my fall. Um, There's one reviewer of Maya Blue said that I have the life and death survival instincts of Jason Bourne, that
Yeah.
I make them in an instant. And I
Yes.
think that's one of the ones that she's
Mm,
referring to.
yeah.
But yes, I learned, I guess, the hard way, um, that again, you can't panic.
Yes. Yes. It's yes, because if you panic, you freeze, right? So it is like that instantaneous. What are the options and do?
And I had been trained to plan for worst case.
Exactly. And
And
here
so,
you were facing a worst case, most certainly.
and I think we've probably all watched some of those old B movies from the 1950s, the black and white movies where there's the monster and he's with
Yes.
the heroine and she's just standing there with her hand
Ah, yeah.
on either side of her face, like they're super glued there, and she's just screaming, and we're yelling at the TV or the movie
You
screen,
move, get
run!
out. Yes.
She doesn't. So that's I was not that woman.
Hmm.
I did whatever it took to survive,
Hmm.
and which has served me well so many times. You know, I won't go into detail, but Philip died, and
From the cocaine or
no, from lung cancer. But
mm,
all that time, I'm juggling the public company, and it's a nightmare.
hmm.
And at some point after his death, I realized that I needed to find what brought me joy.
Hmm.
I needed to find Brenda again. I needed to find my voice.
What age were you at this point?
By then I was 37.
Hmm.
And so I took a trip to Belize by myself to take underwater pictures and go snorkeling and have
Hmm.
fun. I went to some place that he and I'd been with friends, and it reminded me of happier days when
Hmm.
he was the Philip I knew and loved, not the drug addict
Hmm.
that I became afraid of. And while I was there, I learned that the archaeologists had opened Tikal in Guatemala, the Tikal, one of the Maya ruins.
Hmm.
And I decided, oh, instead of going home right away, I'm going to go to Tikal. Remember, I'm love Mayan ruins,
Hmm.
and so I took a bus from Belize City that was supposed to take me to Tikal, but instead it dropped me off in the middle of the jungle.
Why?
It turned out it was a Catholic holiday,
So they don't go anywhere?
Assumption Day. And the bus driver had all along the way, he'd been letting people out along the side of the road and they'd get their stuff off. It was a school bus, a big
Hmm.
old yellow school
Hmm.
bus. And he'd forgotten that I wanted to get off at this little town, and he'd overshot the town. And so he just stopped the bus and he said, um, leave now, essentially. And put my bag on the side of the road, and he just pointed in the direction of the little town that we'd already passed. And so I started walking in that direction, and this sweet man, a cab driver, I learned a lot about that man that day. He was 56 years old, and he was on his way to Guatemala City. That's where he drove a taxi, and he would come home on weekends to see his wife and his kids. I think his older wife died because his wife was young and he had older children and younger children. And as he told me, he said, I work for them.
Hmm.
And so he told me that he picked me up, and he told me that he could take me to the frontier, is what he called it, where I could catch a bus. And he meant by the frontier the border between Belize and Guatemala. And we wound up on the wrong road.
Ooh.
And we were in Guatemala on the Guatemalan Army's
Ugh.
training base.
Oh no. Oh no.
And to make a long story short, they forced us out of the car at gunpoint and they walked us 15, maybe 20 minutes into the jungle. I didn't know it then, but I know now that according to the United Nations, the faction of the army, this group of the army that took me is considered the worst of the worst.
Mm-hmm.
They were at the time responsible for the disappearance, or what they called in Guatemala, los desaparecidos, the disappeared, 45,000 people who went missing. Many of them were people from other countries like Canadians and Americans. And they had murdered upwards of 200,000 people.
Wow.
And they would go into the villages and rape the women,
Of course.
gang rape women. I didn't know that then, but I knew whatever they had taken me into the jungle for was not good.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not panicking.
Mm-hmm.
My friend, the cab driver, I think by this time was in shock.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say I created an opportunity and I hurt one of the soldiers very bad.
Good for
He
you.
recuperated, but and I grabbed my passport and I saw what they had done with the keys to the taxi. And I grabbed Esteban's hand and we ran.
Good for you.
And while I was there in the jungle, I saw this vivid blue on one of the ruins, kind of peeking through the vines and the trees of the jungle. That's the plumber. I'm sure you can hear him by now. Um, but there was this vivid blue, and I it's a real color, and it's called Maya blue.
Mm-hmm.
And art historians say it's the strongest, most resilient pigment known to man.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've titled my book Maya Blue after this color. And I've used it as a metaphor, not just for my strength and resilience, but for yours and for everybody's, because we're all having to survive something. And if
Yeah.
not right now or haven't, at some point, I'm guessing we will. So that's
Yes.
where the title came from.
I mean, obviously, you wouldn't be here sharing this story had you not had the gumption, the level-headedness, the past terrors from your husband to take action. Because had you not taken action, so many people become paralyzed, and the fear of dying, they're going to kill you. So if you die fighting, at least you die fighting. But standing there waiting to be shot, I never understand that, and it's really pure fear and panic that makes people freeze up and unable to do anything. But again, as you said, from your entire past, from facing your husband trying to kill you, there's a certain survival instinct in you that went into, as you said, your Jason Bourne mode, and you took an opportunity where I'm sure the taxi cab driver, knowing who they are and what they do, was just thinking, oh shit, I drove down the wrong road. I not only killed this lady, I've killed myself. What about my family? And probably paralyzed by it. So you taking action and hurting and then running and getting the hell out of there, it's not only kudos to you, but it's to everyone else is there is always an option. There
Always.
always. And it's just take that deep breath and sometimes it's instantaneous and you have to respond instantaneous. It is life and death. And other times, maybe it's just take a moment to pause before you react or before you do something. But with you, it had to be instantaneous. And both times, it had to be instantaneous. Um, and thank goodness that you have that instinct. But as you said, in a lot of ways, he prepared you for that. Your mother prepared you for that, of dealing with what came down the pipe in the moment, and you had to deal with it in the moment. There wasn't the luxury of I'll get back to it. It's like life and death, and having to deal with it. And not many people can go through that because, as I said, they do panic. But when somebody's survival becomes so instinctual, there is no option other than me to react, to do something, because the alternative is goodbye. Right? Then it's stepping forth and to discover your courage and your strength and your abilities in those times is really where you see your resilience. And if you can go through that, you can go through everything, anything.
You can. And we all have a survival instinct. It's in our DNA.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's just not well honed for most.
Exactly.
Our
No.
ancestors, uh, they had that instinct
Yeah.
in center, but we think we live in a civilized world, but you know with everything that's going on in the news around the world, we also
Yes.
know that there are bad people out there that can, whether we're taking a walk down our favorite trail in a wooded area near our home, uh, or even you stop for gas and there's a shooting at a
Yeah.
convenience store. um, I just want to urge everybody, don't wait, don't hesitate. If you're in a situation where you think somebody's going to harm you or kill you, or even if you're a woman and your spouse is abusing you, there are phone numbers and there are websites that you can visit, and in that case, make a plan.
Yeah.
Even if your plan is, I'm grabbing the hand of my child and I'm running out of this house and I'm running down the street, you've got to do it, and you've got to do it now.
And as you run down that street, you scream blue bloody murder so that
Absolutely.
other people come out, because once they see there's a mass around you, it depowers them. So you've got to do whatever you need to do. I've been in a few situations in my life, nothing like, the guns. Strangulation seemed to be what people wanted to do with me. Uh, Attempted rape and
We're both laughing. It's
yeah,
not.
but you have to laugh. And attempted rape, and all I could think of while he was strangling me was knees up, Mother Brown. And I just brought my knees up, hit him in the groin. And while he's doubled over, kind of kicked him out of my door, closed the door, and then, didn't leave my door for a long time. There was no call the police. I didn't even have a phone or anything like that. And you have to just kind of do what you can do in the situation. But the worst thing is to freeze and not do anything. And I know that's the first thing that kind of comes over you, is a sense of freeze. This can't be happening to me. But your survival instincts, just let them come in and do what you need to do in that moment, whatever it is you need to do. Otherwise, it's bye bye.
Absolutely. And I would also say that um, we have intuition.
Yes, 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 yes.
And so if you ever think, I'm not I'm not sure I should walk down that street. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure I should turn left at the corner. I was just in Philadelphia over the weekend. I was keynote speaker at a gala there. And my hostess we were driving and she said, I'm not going to take the shortcut because a year ago, let me tell you what happened when I did.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I knew before I drove down that street that it was a bad street and I shouldn't go. But I told my husband I'd be home in a few minutes. And so
Mm-hmm.
I took the shortcut. She got caught in a gang shootout.
Ah.
Literally, the man in the car next to her had a gun, and she said he looked at her and pointed it at her, and then he just moved it and started shooting other people, and then he got shot.
Mm.
And she wound up driving over a sidewalk and getting away. But she said, I knew before I went down, where before I
Yeah, we
turned down.
don't pay attention. We don't pay attention to our instincts. I was living in Washington, D.C. back in the 70s for a while. And I was looking after someone's home and I borrowed a car for the day to go into town. And coming out, I took the wrong road. And of course, no GPS or anything like those back in those days, right? And I stopped to ask these three guys, how to get to the highway, and then acknowledged they had chains around them and everything else. So I had found my ditzy blonde, British blonde. At that time I was also living in South Africa, so I don't want any of that accent to come through. Um, allow my ditzy blonde to come through. I'm so sorry, I'm lost. And they say, oh, you're English. Yes, yes. Oh, love America. It's so wonderful and exciting. And they all of a sudden there's more people, with all sorts of things attached to them as weaponry. And they asked me a few questions about England and this or that, etc. And then they escorted me to the highway. When I got home, the person's house I was looking after for free board and lodging, I would cook and clean. She was a historian and she had a friend over who was a police detective. And I was late and she was getting worried. So when I walked in and I told them what happened, he said, you were what? You were where? He said, the cops don't even go down there. It's so violent. Right. And he said, you got out? How did you get out? And I think it's I knew it probably if I took flight, I would go down the wrong road and probably get more into trouble. But it's like, what is your weapon of choice in that moment? And my weapon of choice in that moment was just to play a harmless ditzy blonde that was more intriguing rather than showing my fear. And that came instinctually to me. And in actual fact, got me out of a lot of trouble because I lived in South Africa for a long time and there was apartheid and a great deal of violence going on there. And there was many a time I had to kind of use that attitude.
Well, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm sure some of your listeners do as well. It's just that old adage of seize the moment is
Yes, yes, yeah,
just do it.
just
But
do it.
yeah, I think Maya Blue is a really powerful reminder that our voice and
Hmm.
our truth are among some of the strongest powers that we have, and with them we can survive almost anything.
There's a saying that I bring up in a lot of shows, and you are the epitome of it. I say there's the common sense fear. Don't put your hand in the fire. Don't walk in front of a bus. Don't go down that dark alley at 3 o'clock at night. Common sense fear. That fear is like, no, you don't do that because you're going to get into trouble if you do so. If you take common sense fear with you into that unknown and look at it as wondrous, as exploratory, as curious, and you want to go down that adventure of exploration, but take common sense fear with you, that protects you, you're the epitome of that. Your common sense fear was kind of entrenched in you as a child. And then you married a man that kind of exacerbated that even more, how to register that fear, when to recognize to be fearful and
Mhm.
when to be courageous, but always be wondrous.
Yes. So it's yes, I hope your listeners can take something from this. And if they're interested in knowing more about Maya Blue, please go to my author website. It's Brenda dash coffee, COFFEE, like the drink, .com, Brenda-coffee.com.
And of course, you're on Facebook, Brenda R. Coffee. You're on Instagram, 1010 Park Place.
1010 Park Place. Yes, I have one of the top blogs for women over 50.
Wonderful, fantastic. You're in LinkedIn, Brenda Coffee. And of course, the book can be found on Amazon and other places. So Maya Blue, A Memoir of Survival by Brenda Coffee. And like
And
just, with what you've shared here today, it's for some people, it is fantastical. Like, never if just even one or two of the things that you've talked about today, what they have experienced in their lives, never mind everything that you've experienced. But here you are, still not only a resilient woman, I assume still exploratory, in your life, but, perhaps more in a calmer way, you know, not so rushing into danger. But still, with, as I said, that common sense fear, the exploration, the wonderment of what is and what can be, but perhaps now with a little different sensibility.
absolutely. And I've done all those, hanging by the edge of your fingernails.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to still be here kind of thing.
Yes.
And so, my idea of a great time is going to Philadelphia. By the way,
Yeah.
I met the most incredible women at this gala, and um, that's what's been missing in my life, really,
Mm,
is having a network like that. I have that network. I'm just been glued to trying to birth this book. So
hmm
um, it's
why did it take you so long to write the book?
well, if you think about it, confessing that your husband knew how to make cocaine is not exactly something you want to share with somebody.
True. That's courage in itself, right? Yes. Yeah.
But COVID came along,
Mm,
and I've been keeping notes on my computer um, for decades.
hmm
And so I just began writing.
Did
And
you ever remarry?
I did James Coffee.
Wonderful.
He was heaven sent. And unfortunately, he died on Christmas Day while out for a walk a
Oh
number
no.
of years ago. And that was one of the hardest things I've had to get through.
hmm I kind of assume with your first husband, the death, in a sense, kind of became somewhat of a relief because you knew he was driving down that road, with the cocaine, the alcohol, the smoking, everything, and that there was an inevitable crash, so to speak. So,
Yes.
kind of in a way, you were expecting it, and in some ways, not that you wish it on them, but there is a relief when it does come because you know that there was no way of stopping them.
Well, that's so interesting that you say that because after Philip died, I called a woman that I knew whose husband had died not terribly long before, and she was much older than I was. And I remember that she said to me, she said, "I'm going to be frank with you. I'm relieved it's over.
hmm
I'm
hmm
relieved for both of us."
Yeah,
And I knew exactly what she meant.
yeah. But obviously, with this husband, that wasn't the case. So I would imagine that this one hit you a great deal harder.
No, this man was everything I waited for all my life.
Mm,
One of my girlfriends said, "You had the romance and the fairy tale. You had it all. You had,
yeah,
most of us never get."
right. I mean, yes, what you've packed into your life is what people watch in movies but never experience. And so you've lived, and actually by sharing it in the book, by sharing it here today, some people don't live an adventurous life, but they live vicariously through somebody else's story, right? And, they're never going to go down any of the roads that you've gone down, but by listening to those, maybe they're grateful for their sturdiness, or maybe vicariously they live on the adventure. Why do we watch adventurous movies? Why do we read adventurous books? It's because, we become the character. And, writing your memoir by sharing all of these things, it's like, what would I do in that situation? Or stepping into those shoes. And then I imagine by the end of the book, they're going to go, phew, I'm glad my life is just stable. Because not everybody could live that kind of life. Not
No,
everybody could.
no,
But your mum set it up for you, and whether you knew it or not. She robbed you of your teenage years, but in what she did in setting you up, set you on that road for adventure. So you've truly lived, girl.
I have. And I'm grateful to be here. And I look back at my younger self sometimes with my mouth agape.
Yes, I know. What were we thinking? I know. And it's we watch you go through it in a different way today, but it is I mean, just we know back in the day it's not so bad now, but Guatemalan murderers, that nobody came out alive. There was a warning not to go there. And the fact that you disarmed somebody and you ran, dragging, the taxi driver, and the Maya Blue kind of being your beacon. It's how the hell you got out of there, I don't know. How did you get out of there?
Uh, your readers are going to be, I think, empowered when they read what I did.
Excellent. Yes, most certainly. Because, like, who would be in that situation? And here is somebody thinking he's driving you to safety, and one wrong turn, right? And that's, life in itself is pay attention to those roads and, trust your instinct, because that one wrong turn can have you facing something that you never thought you would face, no matter what it is in life. And it's like, are you up to facing it? Are you prepared in facing it? What would you do in that situation? And I think it's good for us to kind of think on that, that backpack of information of what would you use in that time. And the number one is don't panic.
Never.
You're a remarkable woman. You are a remarkable woman. And thank you so much for sharing here today, because this is extraordinary, the life you've had, and still having. So it's, in sharing all this adventure, but crossroads. And when you think about it, you can't live such a high life without there being, the downside of it. And, that is also something we need to look at. We can chase things, but then what's the cost at the end? And
There.
yeah, there's always a cost. Are we willing to pay it? And at what point can we kind of maybe just bring that down into a little safer equilibrium, which comes with, that hindsight comes with age and experience, but it's not always a monster youth. When we're youthful, we're indestructible when we're youthful, right? Mm.
I know. We're, in many ways, I'm sure a lot of us are lucky to be here. It's not
Yes.
just me.
Yeah. And, that appreciation, that gratitude for having the experience, for being able to come through and tell the story, but also kind of the gratitude for sometimes what you see in the stillness and what you see in the silence, what you see in just the beauty of presence, and that it doesn't always have to be the frill. The frill can be in that stillness as well.
I'm grateful to God and I thank Him every day.
Mm. Yeah. You're here, girl, to tell the story despite what has happened. And a good reminder to people that whether you take that path or whether you go down that road or not, is just how resilient we are, how strong we are when we're faced with, those things we have to face, no matter what it is you're facing, on what level, that we can dig deep. We can find our courage and our strength, that ability to stand up for ourselves and fight back. Do not give in. Do not give up. Stand up.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank
Sarah, for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure, my pleasure. And remember, folks, you can find it on Amazon and it's brenda-coffee.com. Reach out, please. This is a remarkable story. Remember, I always say a book is a gift that you keeps on giving. So if you've got somebody with a birthday coming up, all right, start buying the books for Christmas and give them out to everybody. This is something that you're not just giving a great story. You're giving something that's a reflection of their own life and of other people's life. It's something that pays just so much more than just the moment. It's something that you can be instilled in someone. So give the gift of the book and give the gift of adventure. And you're giving the gift of resilience and tenacity. And so everybody needs some of that. So thank you so much, Brenda. And to everyone else out there, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tag at the top there and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration, it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.